Hello, good evening. My name is Kwabena. Welcome. I want to share with you kinds of education. And education is how people get enlightened. Is how people get inspired. There is a lot that can be done with enlightened minds, and it's a systematic process where instruction, skill, values, habits are given to people or are impacted to people. And so depending on the part and what kind of information that you're able to extract, so the kind of training that you have in terms of education will help you to acquire some kind of knowledge, because it's systematic tools people are giving. And so the education that we are giving helps us to be able to acquire certain kinds of knowledge, and that all those help us to build something with our lives and do something with our lives. So I want to talk about kinds of education. The first one on my mind is the very first one that a lot of us know, which is the academic education. The academic education is the kind of education that we are sent to school to, and it's the kind that most people who go to the classroom, whether it's the secondary school or the university, get to have. The next one is the career kind of education. It's the education that we acquire after we have had the academic kind of education. And so after you have had some certificate, some basic qualification, the professional training that you get, you become maybe a farmer, you become maybe a doctor, you're trained, psychologist, a business person. That systematic process that you go through in trying to acquire certain career-related education itself gives us another form of education. The third kind of education I want to talk about is the family or relationship. This kind of education is the tools that we are given to be able to build our social skill, our relationship skill, how we make friends, how we relate to people, how we marry, how we get along with people. If you had the basis right, if you had the basic instruction, the processes, if you were taught rightly, you will do better in this life. That is the family kind of education. The next one will be spiritual, or spiritual kind of education. Every human, one way or the other, believes in something. Even if you are an atheist, there is a conviction that you have, whether for or against the spiritual. Your understanding of it is very important, especially when you are given the right basis, because education is a systematic process of impacting knowledge, or giving instruction, of shaping value system, habits, skills. And so your spiritual education is responsible for your belief system in terms of that is beyond the physical. And then there is health kind of education, your information on health, on fitness, what you eat is dependent on the level of health education that you have. So some people have very good health education. You can see the lifestyle that they have, the water they drink, the food they eat, the exercises that they do. They don't just happen. There was a systemic build-up of information, of knowledge, and that is an education. And there is also racial or cultural or historical kind of education. There are different kinds of races in this on this earth, and very bad. Unfortunately, people have been classified according to race, according to tribe, according to how their skin looks like. So how systematically you've been educated on race, on a history, on culture, has a lot to do with how the world throws you or moves you around. Africans have been wrongly educated in terms of skin color, in terms of the world history, in terms of how the different races live on this earth, and that's why we've been controlled. So there's been a systemic wrong education of the African race, and how you re-educate yourself in this is so much important. That is the racial or the cultural or the historical kind of education. The next one is personal or purpose kind of education. That is what you study about yourself, your gift, your talent, what you see that you were born to do. That kind of education is very important as to what personal peace, satisfaction that you get out of life. It's that much critical that you consciously study that. The last one is the financial or the entrepreneurship or the business kind of education. What moves this world around, whether we like it or not, is money. And the education that you have, you can get PhD in the academic education, and you may have zero or kindergarten kind of education in finance. You see, so in that case, whatever you understand about finance is weak. So that's why you can get somebody who has gone to a lot of schools but knows nothing about finance. And unfortunately, it's systematic education, as I define it, or as is defined by the expert, is a deliberate, systematic approach in impacting knowledge to people. And so the kind of information that you get, how conscious, how well it was crafted to you to shape your beliefs, your values, your attitude, your skill, that shows how much education you have in that field. So I was trained as an engineer. When I went to school, they gave me engineering kind of education. I cannot translate that into all the other kinds of education easily. And so if I want to have a very good family life, I would have to get constructive instructions in that, so that I'll be able to build a very good family life. If I want to have a good spiritual education, I cannot use the engineering to get good spiritual education. Some people have extracted principles in spiritual knowledge. I would have to get those kind of information, or I would have to get those kind of knowledge, be taught rightly. Then I can have the basis of the kind of right education that I have. Unfortunately, people think that because they went to school to do mathematics or they went to school to do marketing, it means that they have financial education, or they have the purpose kind of education, or they have the history or the racial kind of education right, or even the health or the family, or maybe even the career kind of education. It's wrong. It's not true. Until you have systematically been taught or studied that kind of education, you don't have the basis to be able to extract the information which becomes knowledge that you can use to win. So you see, there is education, there is knowledge, and there is information. Education is the systematic tools that they give you, so that the information that they throw around, the one that will get your attention, is the one that you have been trained well, processed well. So you see somebody who has been trained how to identify gold in the soil. If you move him through any place that there is gold, because they have given him the basis right, he will be able to identify gold. So when you are moving around, it's all information that they are throwing at you. He's able to extract something from the information. That becomes his knowledge. And then that knowledge becomes power that he can fight life with. And so if you were trained, casual training, and your financial education is not zero, until somebody else helps you with, draws your attention, teaches you, coaches you, build your financial education, you will not be able to understand the financial world or the entrepreneurship or the business world. And so a lot of people can deceive themselves to believe that because they have gone to school to get PhD, masters, first degree, JSS, those kind of things, they think that they've been educated financially. And that's what the problem is. Because nobody consciously told them, gave them the basis, gave them the right tools to use to extract out of the information that is being thrown, that is being spread around. You know, so people believe that they're educated. You're only educated in something that you were taught rightly. All the other ones, you are not educated. All the other ones, you just been given some bits and pieces of something. It's not constructive. And that's why you don't have knowledge, the right knowledge in it. That's why you don't have that kind of power to win in any area that you think. So my name is Kwabena. I'm talking about kinds of knowledge, and the kinds of knowledge that I'm talking about academic education, I'm talking about kinds of education. So academic education, I'm talking about career related education, family education, spiritual or faith education. We have what they call health education, racial or history kind of education, personal or purpose kind of education, and financial education, which falls into business and entrepreneurship. See, so education is the way that people get enlightened. A human being has to be enlightened. All of us have brains, minds that we have to develop. We need to be enlightened. Now, until there is a system, there is a structure in place to give us this enlightenment, we are not educated. And so it's a systemic process of giving instruction, of giving skill, of impacting knowledge, of value development, of belief system, of shaping people's belief system, of helping people to have the right habits. These processes that are intentionally designed to help people to bring these things out is what we call education. So until it was intentionally done to you, until you were taught deliberately, until there was a constructive thing to give those kind of things to you, you don't have that kind of education. You don't have that. It's either you train yourself or somebody has trained you. But there was a conscious intentional. It was intentional. It was intensive. Somebody has studied the subject and they taught you. And so we have the basic ones. Everybody thinks that when you go to school, it means you're educated. So if you went to school to study science, at least there is some kind of intention in that, because they give you models, they teach you history, chemistry, physics, those things that they teach you. Those were intentional. And the person who was teaching you was also taught by somebody. So there is some kind of information they're giving you, and they expect you to be tested and be qualified. If you were taught in marketing, there are models that they will teach you. If they taught you, say, history, there are models. So if you didn't go to school to study that, it's likely that you just heard something about it, but you are not intentionally processed, or you have not been intentionally processed with that. So we cannot say that you've been educated in that. So if I studied sociology in the college or in the university, and another person studied, say, publishing, the one who studied publishing cannot say that I was educated in sociology, because the models, the intention, the lecturer didn't teach me. So it's conditioned, it's established, it's thoughtful, it's deliberate. Up until that, you cannot call it as education. Now, those are just academic kind of education that we all get. So what the society knows is that everybody who's educated, we don't think that some people have gone to school but they don't know something. So we think that everybody has gone to school, has been educated. They've been educated maybe, but they've been educated in certain areas. And really, most of them were given to them just to write exams and just to have some kind of profession when they get out of school. Now, the life kind of education comes in different forms and in different kinds. The life kind of education. So when you go to school, you are just being given one kind of education, which we call academic kind of education. It's academic. You're just given, you're trained as all the courses that they give to people in school. So if they train you in that, it was conscious, it was deliberate, it was intentional, it was structured, that is education, because it's intentional. You are studying something to get some kind of input. So if they train you in that field, anybody who didn't get that kind of training does not have that kind of strength of knowledge to even argue or compete with you. Even though people can easily, you see people are doing the media people. If somebody went to GIG, Ghana Institute of Journalism, they have given them, if you meet somebody with a degree from GIG and somebody who just entered radio without learning anything, teaching himself nothing, they are not the same people. The one who went to GIG has been trained, at least giving the basis. They have taught them the history about journalism, they have taught them the tools, they have taught them what it takes to become the best in that field. Those are skilled, those are taught intentionally. So that is a form of education. Now, when it comes to life, the most unfortunate thing is that that person who has been taught journalism thinks that he's educated for life. And so when life gets tough and life beats them, especially when it comes to maybe their relationships, their marriage, their relationship with their children, their family, or when it comes to maybe even their spiritual education or spiritual life, or even when it comes to health, or when it comes to even finances, especially, that's where people get attention, or what even to do with their lives. They think that because they were given that journalism kind of education, it means they know all this. And so people go through life without knowing that there are different kinds of education that they should have intentionally learned. Unfortunately, we are structured to only get the intentional education, which is the academic. So the academic knowledge is intentional, which is good. But the other forms of education, you would have to school yourself intentionally, or you will not succeed in any of them. And these are the ones that I have identified. Some people may have identified a lot of them, but I think that there are about 8 of them. And the first one is all that we know, which is the academic kind of education. And so you came out with a certificate they gave you, and you studied agriculture, you studied accounting, you studied marketing, you studied biology, you studied medicine, you studied law. That is one kind of education. It's academic, you know. And so somebody can study as an engineer and he will not practice as an engineer. So when you go to the next phase of education, is the professional or career kind of education. So if I train as an engineer and I did not practice as an engineer, I don't have that kind of profession. I don't know how to practice as an engineer. Now, if I go to practice as an engineer, it will take me a while for me to meet seniors who have practiced, who will teach me how the profession is done. And so there is a conscious training that they are giving me. They are giving me tools. And those tools that they give me, I can use to build an engineering profession. So the fact that you are given an academic education in one field does not mean that you have that professional education. And so somebody could be trained as economics and he may never practice as an economist. Be trained in economics and he will never be practiced as an economist, you know. But somebody will just have the basic economics, you know, academic training, and then he goes to practice as an economist. That one has developed professional education in that. So he is intentional, he's focused, he's trained in that field. And so he can get results in that. He will be able to build a very good knowledge base. He becomes powerful in that field. Because the education is the only thing that gives you the tools to extract knowledge. Other than that, everything that happens is just an information to you if you are not trained in it. So you are able to extract knowledge from information when you have been tooled well, when you have been conditioned, trained, processed well with education. The next form is the family or relationship kind of education. When you finish college, you think that you know human beings until you have studied that subject well. And that will not be taught in school. It's something that maybe you have to just buy books, go for seminars, train yourself in that, because there's a way to relate with human beings for it to become successful. So the fact that you were trained in the university, or you were trained in the JSS, you were trained in carpentry, in masonry, in something, does not mean that you have the basic education in family or in relationship. And so you can meet somebody who is top professor, but who has no clue of how to relate with humans, because he was not intentional. He didn't study that side. He did not school himself that side. He did not get the basic kind of education in relating with people. So you see that person will struggle with how he relates with people, how he marries, how he relates with children, because he was not given the right basis, the tools. It was not intentional. So he only has information, and information is not enough to change any human. It's not enough to bring progress. What is enough to bring progress is the knowledge, and you can only extract knowledge from information when you have the basis right. When you have the basis, and the education is what gives you the basis to identify which one applies to you. And so if you have the family education done rightly, if you have the relationship education done rightly, then you see that you'll be able to know how to relate with human beings, how to inspire people, how to get the best out of people, because you have studied it. Now, it may not be something that they would have to give you a certificate in it, but you may have read a lot of books on that subject. Relationship, family, marriage, men, women, children, how to raise children, all those, anything that has to do with humans. If somebody has studied HR, for instance, they are taught them. So that is a good foundation of how to handle human beings in an organization. If somebody did not get that kind of training, his understanding of how humans relate in an organization is very weak, because he only has information. The knowledge is not strong, because the tools, the training was not constructive. The training was not intentional. And until the training has been intentional, it is not education. It's just some information that you get, and you can ask questions on it. It's like medicine. I can pick a medical book and read and ask questions, but I will not be able to relate with what I'm reading. Why? Because somebody else did not teach me intentionally. Somebody else did not give me those tools intentionally. And so I will talk as if I'm an expert, but I will not be able to get any better results. If you send me to the theater, I will not be able to do the surgery, because I was not equipped with the right information, with the right tools, which is the education, which can help me to extract knowledge, which I can use to build the belief, I can use to build the skill, I can use to build the habit, to get results. And so the next form of education we talk about is health kind of education. And the health kind of education has to do with how the human beings live and live well, whether they live in a family, whether in their personal lives, or whether even in a country. The composite health of the country is a reflection of the health knowledge that the country has, the fitness knowledge that the country, education that the country has. And so you as an individual, myself as an individual, how we eat, how we understand our health, the kind of food that we eat, what time we eat what, the way we rest, how we handle the whole body is a reflection of the kind of education that we have had in terms of health or in terms of fitness. And so if nobody taught you anything, you'll be the one who eats anything. You eat anything at all, you just exhaust your body, you don't practice anything, and then you have a situation with your health. Why? Because all your life you have practiced something that you were not educated in. So you were not constructive, you were not intentional. And so you just eat anything. Maybe you eat kelewele in the morning, kelewele in the evening. You eat white bread, you eat sugar, you drink everything. Your system, you don't even drink water, because you were not educated in that. The one who has been educated in health, when you listen to them, you see that they will tell you what health is about. They will tell you what forms the cells, what makes you sick and what does not make you sick. They will tell you which food to eat at what time, which food is good for your health, which good food is not good for your health. They will tell you which exercise is good for you, which exercise is not good for you. You may know your blood type, your heartbeat, at what age for you to stop eating what and sleeping at what time. Because the human being is that complex. So anybody with the right health education then is able to get a lot of information and extract the right knowledge to live the right life in health. So if you have the right sense of how complex or how delicate the human structure is, and you're driving, you will know which speed limit to go, because you know that at a certain limit you can crash and die, because you're health conscious. Why? Because they gave you the right form of education in health, or you've got the right kind of information or the right kind of education in health. So when somebody else is talking anyhow, you will not talk anyhow. Why? Because you have the basis. You have the basis. So it will pattern your character. It will pattern how you live. And people who live long life, their health education is most likely to be one of the best. Why? Because they know that the actions that they take based on the health education that they have will reflect in their lives. So when people have not been educated, you can be top engineer, top doctor, but your health information may be wrong. And if your health information is wrong, your behavior is erratic. So one thing about education is that education is intentional. So your choices are informed. But when you just had information naively, they say that the half-educated people are the most dangerous. The half-illiterate or something, they are most, because they believe that they're educated. So when we get a little information on something, a lot of people think that they're educated in that. They have never read maybe 5 or 3 or 6 books from the experts in that field, but they still believe that they have that much expertise in that. And that's why you don't see consistency in the results. You see, today they hit well, tomorrow they go down, because what they are practicing from is not intentional. It was not deliberate. And so your health education is responsible for the kind of health that you have. If you have proper health education, even the medicines that they use, you will know. People who know it, they will tell you, oh, this kind of drug is wrong, this kind of drug is not wrong, this kind of food is right, this kind of herbs, this kind of leaves is what you have to do. They know. They are the ones who are cautioning you, processed food, you should minimize them, you should minimize the drink, because they have been intentional in studying that. It may not even be certificate course, but they have some repository of knowledge in that. And then when it comes to racial and then cultural or historical kind of knowledge, history, it has to be intentional, especially when it comes to the African. Because the world has been engineered or structured to take advantage of the African, to use Africa as the base of raw materials, and to use the Africans as workforce to feed industries. Until you have proper history, education, proper intentional, until you have read about 5-7 books on African history, on the world history, you have no clue what history is, because they will hide a lot of things, and they have hidden a lot of things from people. So you see somebody who is an expert in economics, they come on radio and they ask a lot of intelligent questions on the situations of Africa, and they appear intelligent, but they are just shallow. Why? Because he may not have sat down to read and to see the pattern of how things have been done. So they the one who get frustrated because they have gone to school, they have their friends who they went to school from all these top universities, and they try to explain the African situation, and they try to explain why there is equality and things have changed and we live in a modern world, because they are shallow. Until they start to read the data intentionally, they have no education in that. Unfortunately, a lot of them are like that, who are given a lot of information and expertise on Africa. So you meet the guy from World Bank who is trying to give a solution on Africa, and he's never been to Africa, he's never read any book on Africa. All his critical situations or his critical thinking is based on the media in his country, how they inform him on Africa. Now, these are the people who are making a lot of decisions on Africa. Or you can even meet a lot of Africans here who have not read any book on race, on culture, on history. And so they are always asking you frustrating questions, because it's just information that you have, and information does not produce results. It's knowledge that produces results. And the knowledge, you can only extract the knowledge from the information when you have been based rightly, when you have been educated rightly, when you have been intentionally tooled, schooled, taught. So until that, you just ask scanty questions. So you get some of these guys on Joy FM talking about Africa, and they have never read one book. Not one on Africa. The Mansa Musa that he had, they told him in the Genesis the Songhai Empire and the Timbuktu and those things, they told them. And so they ask intelligent questions. They are the people who say, but we don't need history, we don't need to live on that. Maybe, but then the more you are asking those questions means that you don't know a lot. So you've not been intentionally educated in history, on race. So you are the one asking questions. Why everywhere in the world Africans are the poorest, they are the marginalized? There's something wrong with the black man. There's something, the black man is scarce. The black people don't help themselves. All those questions that people ask is because they have not studied it. And so they could be expert in another field. They could be the president of a country. They could be the vice president of a country. They could be top religious leader. They could be top finance man. He could be a top business person. He could be a billionaire. But he has not studied that. And when he has not studied that, the questions that he asks on those areas are not intelligent questions because they were not intentional. And so they will bring somebody, they will go and bring, top guy. And then they ask him a question that he has not studied. And those are the ones who are confusing people in the world. Because they try to answer everything because they have been successful. So maybe he's a successful businessman because he probably has studied, finance, business, entrepreneurship. He's been conscious with it. So he has the basis right. He's getting results in that. And so he thinks that because he's getting results in that, when they ask him anything on race and history, he has to say something. And usually, they are wrong until they have been schooled, they have been taught rightly. And that's the confusion. So you meet a top politician who is trying to answer questions in areas that he has not studied. But we have got to listen to them because they have the platform. You meet a preacher who is trying to give you answers on Africa. And he's not studied one bit on that. Not even from the Bible. And they are the ones who are giving us the generic reasons why Africa is poor. Because you have not studied it. So you will help yourself when you base the argument, when you study. Some of them you will not just have to go to school. Some of them you don't just have to go to school. Some of them the information are in books. People have written books that when you pick 1, 2, 3, 4, you read 10 books on that subject, you will know a little about that. And those who help you, those who separate you from a lot of people who are just asking based on the information that they have. You will not ask questions based on the information that you have. You will ask questions based on the knowledge that you have, because the knowledge is standing on a proper constructive process that you have gone through, which is the education. So there's a lot you can put in perspective when you're able to separate them. And so the next one that I will talk about is personal or purpose kind of education. And so you could be a doctor and not know yourself. You could be an engineer, a business person, and you don't know yourself. You don't know how you were brought up, how you were made for this life, your gift, your passion, and that's what the frustration sets in. The things that make you different from the other people, because you may not have schooled yourself in that. You don't even know what it means for a person to have purpose for this life. So you would be the one to educate yourself in that. And that is a good form of education. And so you meet people who are just talking. They're just talking, but they have not studied the subject. They have not studied the subject. And there's a lot of information going on around. And the next form, which is the 8th kind of education, is what I call the financial, the entrepreneurship, or the business kind of education. Now, the business is separate from all the other ones. The finances are separate from all the other ones. And so people have been programmed just to have information on finance, but they are not educated in finance. I'm not talking of the one who went to read MBA in financial management. That is just a certificate to look for a job. I'm talking of an education that will build the base for your financial freedom. The way you understand how finance, money is made and money is created, how money is multiplied, how important money is to a lot of things, how it is done, and how it is changing. All these forms of education, you see that the first change that you see is that they change your personal situation. And so if you say that you are financially educated and your personal situation is not changing, is not improving, you are not educated financially. You just have information. So the financial education that you have is responsible for the financial freedom that you're enjoying. And it's one of the things that people don't study. People go to study, they studied maybe, architecture. And then they go to get another degree in architecture. They try to upgrade themselves in architecture. which is good. But they never go to study the finances. And yet, we expect our finances to change. And it doesn't change like that. Because the only thing that changes anything is the power of knowledge. And without the right tooling, which is the base, the education, you will not have the knowledge to change the situation. And the results that we all enjoy is the proof of the knowledge that we have, that we applied. So the financial knowledge is so much important. So a lot of people are just making decisions with financial information. And the information can win one time and the next day you lose everything. You win the next day, you are up today, tomorrow you are down. You are up today, tomorrow you are down, because you have not studied the thing constructively, which is finance. You have not sat down. You could be 50, 60, 70 years and you never studied finance. You never read just one book or two or three from people who have conquered finances. You never read it because you believe so much that because they gave you that education in law, it means that you understand finance. No, they only told you law. They did not teach you finance. And if you look at your financial situation, you should know that your education there is weak. Because the places that we are weak, the places that we are not getting the results, is the places where our education is weak. It means that there was no intention for us to get the basis and upon which we can extract knowledge from all the information that is going on all around us. So it's not just a wishful thinking. It's a critical thing that we all have to do. And so I would want to go over again and then I wrap up. And so my name is Kwabena. I am talking about kinds of education. And I think that we have about 8 of them. Some people can add a lot of them. Some people can even take some of them out. It's okay. What is important is that we get to understand what we are talking about. And I define education as something that gets people enlightened. When you educate, it could happen in a classroom or it could happen outside classroom. But when you are taught consciously, whether by yourself or by another person, you get enlightened on a particular subject. Constructively, process, systematically. That they shape your belief system, they shape your skill, they shape your color, your character, they shape your value system. That becomes an education. And based on that, then that guides you, that becomes the lens that you look at life with. And so all the data that you hear, all the noise that you hear, that which will make you, be in a position to extract out of the information is the base, which is the education that they have given you. And when you are extracting from the noise, the information is the noise. That is knowledge. And the knowledge is the one that stays with you. And that knowledge is what you use to change in situations of life. And the base is where you develop skill, develop character, you develop a belief system, value system, you become an expert at something. Because there was a conscious effort for you to educate yourself or for somebody else to educate you. Unfortunately, the majority of the world's population only know one kind of education. And that is the one that they sent us to school to get. The one that they sent us to school to get. The academic, that's the one that they pay school fees. So you want to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, beautician, carpenter, mason, that is what they sent us to school to get. So they paid school fees. That's why they place a lot of value on that. And so when you meet your friend, what are you? I'm an accountant, because that's the kind of education that he paid for. That, for me, is just one kind of education. Now, you need at least 7 more for you to become successful in other areas of life. And unfortunately, that one that you pay the school fees for is only that one that gave you a certificate. They gave you a certificate. And the ones that we even have in Africa, it's just that they sent you there, you pay money for something, they taught you biology, and they did not even allow you to use your brain to answer the questions. They just gave you definition, and they expected you to pour out the same thing, and then you pass. They say that you're A student or you're B student, you're first class, and the person comes out of the first class, they can't even use their brain because they did not allow them to use their brain to answer questions and create things. They only allowed them to, they gave them no's, and the people did not even bring any solution. And so that even our kind of education is highly even limited. If you doubt that, just call any graduate from any school and interview them and give them problems to solve, even in the field that they schooled, and you will side with me that there is more that they have to do. So the proper kind of education is really the education that you have that can solve problems. You use your head to solve problems. That is the proper kind of education. So the first one is the academic one that we all know. First form of education that I'm talking about is the academic one, the academic education. And that one, it depends on what kind of education that you have, where you went to school. And so some of them can become anything. They tool you. So I remember when in school, some people were doing agricultural engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer engineering, all kind of geographical engineering. Some people were doing agric, some people were doing English, sociology, economics, all kind of things, publishing, marketing, drawing, methodological engineering, all kind of things that they studied. That is just an academic. It's just one. That's why they just only put you there for 4 years. And so if you're going to live for 70, 80, 90, 100 years, how do you think that just 4 years that they gave you that knowledge is enough for you to become successful in every aspect of your life? That should tell you that they only gave you just one form of education. And when you come out, there are other forms of education that you have got to have, or you will struggle in all the others. You will struggle in all the others. And so the other ones that I'll talk about, after the academic education, I'll talk about professional or career kind of education. So after your school, let's say maybe you finish SSS, you didn't want to go to university, so you went to learn maybe carpentry. That is a profession that you are learning. You can stay with it for 4 years. You become a master in that. Or you went to learn mechanic. You went to become a mechanic. That is a profession. You acquire certain kind of knowledge. They teach you consciously. It's deliberate training that they are giving you. You are confined in a certain way of thinking. That is training. That is education that they are giving you. So if you walk with the mechanic through town, they can identify a sound of a car to say that this car has this trouble. And I will not hear anything. Why? Because he's been trained. He's been educated in that. He has skill in that. He has some belief system in that. He has some basic values in that. He's been instructed. So that's a profession. You meet a finance guy, say he's using certain words. He looks at the economy differently because he's been trained that way. You meet a professor who has taught professionally for 10 years. You see, his world is around the academia. So he teaches in the university. If you meet him, that is the world that he understands. That is professional world. He can talk to you a lot about those. So that is so wherever you are. If you meet a hairdresser, that is the profession that you know. If you meet a cocoa farmer, that is the profession that they know. If I have a farm and I'm producing coconut, if you meet me, we talk for 10 minutes, by all means, we hear coconut in it because I've been trained in that consciously, deliberate training. So that's a professional training. The next form of training that I want to talk about is the family training. Is the marriage, is the relationship. It's how you deal with people. You cannot just use the chemistry that they gave you in the academic education or the professional training that you had to go and build very successful relationships. There's something we call social skill, and that would depend on the quality of information, the instructions that have been put in you. You cannot build better relationship. You cannot lead people well when you don't have very good relationship, family, or human kind of education. How do you understand the human? How do you understand the complexities of the human? How many people can you lead? You cannot build a very good home, a very good family, if your education in that field is weak. A lot of us only have information. We don't have the right base of education. Because without the education, you cannot extract the knowledge from the information. And the knowledge is what is powerful to help you build anything. You know, so you could be a professor in anything. You could be the best footballer, and you would do badly with people, with family, with marriage, with leading people, because you may not have had the foundation set rightly for you. And so it's an area that is so critical. You can't do anything in this life without you being able to work with people from all kind of background. And yet people never study that subject. You know, people are trying to marry and they never study that. They never read a book on it. All these kinds of knowledge, or all these kinds of education, apart from the academic one, all the other ones can be self-taught easily. You just have to have the right sources of information, the right sources of the books. So if you want to establish good family or relationship education, get books, read them well. Don't just take the one on the radio. That is just information. You will relate to it, but you cannot build anything with it. You can't, because you may not know the basis of how a relationship is built. Because people have done studies on them, people have done research on them, people have data on them, what works and what does not work. Until you get those kind of data, until you get those kind of information, you will not be able to build a very strong relationship with people, whether it's a family, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your children, whether it's your work people, whether it's a professional relationship. You will not, because you will just be erratic. You will be unpredictable. You cannot be dependent on. Yet you could be a very well educated person in anything, and you will have it difficult. You will have difficulty relating with people because you did not have the right kind of family or relationship education. And so you are the one who intimidates people, you create fear in people, you talk to people harshly, you're not able to inspire people, and you think that is your tendency. That's not your tendency. So the next form of education that I talk about, which is the fifth one, is the health and fitness kind of education. Your health is very important. The health of your family is a reflection of the family education in terms of health that you have. So if everybody is sick all the time, it means that there is a basis that you don't know as a family. If you are sick all the time, there's something that you don't know about your system. If you just take the human body anyhow, you eat anything, you drink anything, it means there is something you don't know. You just think that you're operating with the information that you had. And all of us have some kind of information anyway. But the information has to become knowledge. And the information can only become knowledge when you have been given the basis, the right kind of education, the right kind of instruction. Because the education is the foundation. So that foundation can help you to get the right knowledge. And then you can build what you want and the results that you want to see. And so when people have not been given the right education in health, they just live anyhow. So today they make the right decision, tomorrow the decision is wrong. Because it's not constructive. It's not proper. It's not been done well. So human beings, as complex as we are, all humans are just depending on one kind of education, which is the academic. And so when they have that academic education, they think they've been educated in all other aspects of life. And then they wonder why they fail in all the other aspects of life. Because you just have education in chemistry. You don't have education in family. Or you don't have education even in the profession. Or maybe the health kind of education. And the other one that I talked about is spiritual education or faith education. Every human relates with some kind of supreme being. Even if they are atheists, they are trying to deny the existence of that supreme being. Your understanding of that will depend on how, or your education in that will depend on how people control you. That's why you can meet a professor who goes anywhere to just go and seek spiritual something, because he's not built his spiritual education well. His understanding of God is weak. And when your understanding of God is weak, anybody at all can control you. It could be illiterate, it could be anything. But because you've not studied that, so you are a professor of history, but you may not be a professor who has had right spiritual or faith education. So your understanding of God is weak. That's why they control a lot of people in Africa. Why? Because our education, our spiritual education is weak. Because If I tell you that go to church, I pray for you, and you become successful, and you believe it, your education is weak. We have over 80% of us being Christians. Yes, corruption is everywhere. People don't have value for another person. The bottom line of Christianity is love for mankind, love for God. So how can you have love and be cheating everybody? How can you have love and be very unforgiving? And yet that is the very definition of Christianity. So what people understand about Christianity, about God, is what? It's something different from the real Christianity. The real Christianity is for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So the love of it, if you love God, you will love people. And if you love people, you treat them with kindness, with respect, with dignity. If you love people, you not cheat them. You have value for lives. This is the bottom line of Christianity. Yet people go to church without understanding some of these things. So people go to church thinking that God is against the use of our mind. And yet the Bible says that God has given us the spirit of love, of power, and of sound mind. Sound mind. So how can you be daft when you serve Christ? I don't understand it. So for me, if you become a Christian, you cannot be stupid. You can't be. Because he gave you that spirit that he gave us. It's the spirit of sound mind. The sound mind to me is what? It's wisdom. People who are precise, who are accurate, who are intelligent. And yet, if you look around our continent, it appears when people become Christians, they don't even become wise anymore. And so there is something which is missing anyway. The guy who is teaching you the Bible cannot even read the Bible. He's shouting at you. He's teaching you to go and live, and yet the atmosphere of him teaching you is shouting. If you went for the lecture and they were shouting, would you hear anything? You never hear anything. Yet you go to that place, they are shouting every day. So what kind of information are they giving you so that you can live? And you wonder why your life doesn't change. Your life does not change because you don't have the right kind of education on God. So you think anybody at all who has the Bible has been called to teach somebody. In our country now, everybody is a prophet. Any young boy who didn't work anywhere, who didn't know what to do with their lives, jumps up, they say they are prophet. They have not studied anything, and they start somewhere. They have not done anything with their lives, and they are starting somewhere. They are teaching people, and they are prophesying and interpreting dreams. Why? Because the majority of the people, their spiritual education is weak, so they feel like they are nothing. So somebody else has to help them. And some people can control you, because the bottom line is that people are just merchandising the gospel. So the essence is livelihood for most of these guys. It's not the love for people. But if you don't educate yourself, they will take advantage of you. So they will just pray the very things that you are uneducated in. Those are the things that people take advantage of you. Why do they sell you alcohol? They get their money. But you are ignorant because you think that it will do you nothing. And the next day you are drinking this alcohol all your life, and the next day you have kidney problems. So they prey on our ignorance because we don't have education in that. So every field that we don't have the right set of education, that's where people take advantage of us. The banks are taking advantage of us because our financial education is weak. So when you go and they're giving you the loan and they calculate, you may not even understand it. Because the world is structured that until you have education in something, the world will beat you in that. The world will cheat you in that. So the next form of education, we talked about the faith education, the health education, and then we go about the cultural or the racial kind of education, where if an African, you've been educated wrongly on race, on how the world operates. That's why when you meet another person of a different race, the normal question that Africans ask themselves is that we are poor, we are backward, and everybody seems to believe in that. It's not true. Get the right books, you will know that a lot has been done by the Africans. Just as some people decided to hide them, and they are not readily available until you find them out yourselves. Because there's a lot of inventions that Africans have done, black people have done, that they will hide from you until you go and find them yourself. Don't you see how they still continue to show Africa as poor continent, even though we know that some places are not that poor? If you go to watch CNN, they are always showing the baller poor area. They never show the nice areas in Africa on their TV. So what makes you think that they will teach you the history that you're not even there rightly? They will not. So until you educate yourself that way, you'll be erratic, and that's why they control you. So they control your emotions, they control your psyche, and you start to ask unintelligent questions, and you think that because you went to school to study economics, you think that this area you know. Until you have studied it, you don't know. Until you have sat down to read books on that, you don't know. And I wish people will just understand that. Until you have schooled yourself in these areas, in these kinds of education, you don't know. You know, you just have one or two scanty informations around, and you think that you know something. You don't know. You don't know. And so the other thing is personal education or purpose. Study yourself. Every one of us was made for a reason to be here on this earth. Find out the reason why you were born. Sometimes the academics that they gave you may not be in line with your talent, but you know in your heart that this is where you are meant to be. This is what you love to do. This is what you are gifted in. This is what you are passionate about. Study that about your life. Study that about life and change that. Sometimes they tell a story where maybe a guy wanted to become a footballer or a musician, and the parents said that will become a lawyer, and so he went to school to get the law certificate, and when he got it, he gave it to the parents, and then he started to become the musician, and he excelled in that. You know, we have a lot of stories like that where people's parents push them to take a particular path, but within them they ache, and so after a while they change and they excel in that. So whatever that you think, you've been gifted by God to change in this life. That is where your purpose is, and that is what you have to do with your life. If you want peace, if you want joy, enjoyment, if you want to make contribution with your life, usually it's embedded in your heart. It cannot be extracted by the academic or even the professional training. It can be extracted by the communication you have with yourself, and that will call for self-education. How well you know yourself, how well you know the things that get your attention. That itself is another form of education. And so people live through this life without listening to that. And that's why they become depressed and dejected and feel miserable. And that hole, that pain, not even money can solve that. If something was to be done by you and you don't do it, nothing can fill that pain. You know, so people can become top anything in anything, but they still yearn that they should have been this. You listen to yourself and you do that, because that's where you become great. That's where you become great. I don't think that I was born to be a footballer, so that's no way I'm building my life, you know. And so that is one area. You get your attention, and that's what nations change. When individuals are able to find their destinies, and they change the course of people. And that calls for education. That calls for a certain level of education. That calls for a certain level of education. So once you get the education right, once you get the basis right, once you get the basis right, you will see that your knowledge in that area becomes exponential, because the basis is right. So when people are talking, you're extracting the ones that apply to you. When people are talking, you extract the ones that apply to you. And that is how people become great. They become great when they live out the heart that God placed in them. You know, so some people's attention are drawn to children. Some people's attention are drawn to scientific inventions, you know, innovation. Some people are gifted to build businesses. Some people are gifted to sing. Some people are gifted to, you know, act. Some people are gifted to become farmers. Some people are gifted to be politicians. Some people are gifted to be preachers. Some people are pharmacists, research fellows. Some people are gifted to be academic. You know, there are some people, when you take them out of their teaching, they can't do any other thing. They so love teaching because they are wired to do that. You know, so that's what their heart is. You cannot take anything from them. Some people are born to be politicians. You see them that they are politicians. They love politics. They love their country. They want to do their best. One of the things that you see that what you are born to do is that your heart is there not for yourself, but for the people. You know, so you like teaching or you love teaching, not because of yourself, not even because of the money that you get, but because you know that is a tool to change the lives of people. That is a place that you're born to be. The other thing is that people confuse that with money, because they think that the purpose education should get you money. No, sir. Money education is what gets you money. Financial education is what gets you money. And the things that you're passionate about to do, or the things that you do with your life, should be entirely separate from the money, because the money will come only when your financial knowledge is right. It will not come because you just work. You work hard. No. And so the purpose education, the personal education, helps you to find who you are. And some people have professional education because it's a profession. They study from school and they do that for a living, but they may not have the heart for it. But the one that you have heart for is the one that you was gifted. You were born to do it. You know it. Some people were born to do something. You can see it. And those are the guys who make names. And they don't fight for themselves. They fight for the betterment of their people. So you can see somebody who will go through streets looking at people who have tough time and helping them. And if they don't do that, they feel like they are miserable. You can see that they can even be at the point of being dead. Some people go to prisons just to help people, and they are so passionate about doing that. If they stop doing that, they become miserable. That is a gift that God gave them. Some people can sit in the lab all day looking for solutions, chemicals, looking to come out with better drugs. If you take them from the lab, they cannot be anywhere, because they were gifted that way. So whatever that you are gifted to do, you study that and do it with your heart, but separate that from the money. So the next one is the financial education, or the entrepreneurship education, or the business education. Money is an education. It's a product of financial education. And so your understanding of money should not be information that is roaming in the air. It should be the conscious training that you have given to yourself. And I define education as a systemic process that knowledge is imparted to people, that skill is imparted to people, or that's how people acquire values. It's deliberate, it's conscious, it's instructive, or you've been instructed. So once you get that as a foundation, when you hear the noise, you'll be able to extract the one which belongs to you. And you extracting from the information becomes the knowledge. And that knowledge is what you use to build a better life. And so financial knowledge is like that. When people start to work, they think that they understand money. No, until you have studied the money, until you have studied finance, until you have studied entrepreneurship, business, you don't understand how money works and how it is acquired. You just have information. And that information is what they told you from the school, from the home, from the society. And that's why you cannot create financial independence or financial prosperity, because you don't have the knowledge yet. You just have information. And most often, that general information that people have is what the society has been structured to be taken advantage of. So if you just have information on anything, you are the one who is working in the interest of the others. Because it's a constructive, deliberate structure. That is education. So until you have done that, you'll get the basis right. All that you know about money is information. And so they told you that when you get a good job, you'll be rich. You believe it. They increase your salary, you'll be rich. You believe it. They told you that when you buy a house, it means that you are rich. You believe it. When you buy a car, you believe that. When you go to a very good school, you become rich. You believe it. Those are all information. Those are not true. Because the data available does not support that. People who control wealth don't have all these things. So if they told you that when you get better job, you'll be rich, go and track all the 1,000 people who have a lot of money in this world. They don't have better job. If they told you that when you read that good course, you'll be rich, you believe it. Go and track all the people who have money. They don't have that. They told you that if you move to another country, you'll be rich. Go and look at the data. Because you don't have constructive information, you are not educated financially. Anybody tells you anything and you believe it. And it happens to all of us. In the areas that we have not studied, when they tell us anything, we just run with them. We believe them. And that's why we don't get the results. And money is one of the major areas that people have been miseducated, so to say, if there's a word like that. They've been given wrong data, wrong information. So go and raise school financially. It's the 8th form of education that I'm talking about. It's the 8th form of education. With it, a lot of other things can be in good perspective. And that's why if the professor studies if the professor re-educates himself financially, he could teach as a professor and still create wealth. Because you'll be able to separate his profession from his money, from his finances. If the doctor re-educates himself financially, you'll be able to separate the money. Because after all, a lot of them are working for money anyway. So why would you not study it? If the businessman does not separate his business education from his financial education, there will be danger. Because the business is not going to make money just because it's a business. The business is going to make money when you start to understand finance, when you educate yourself financially. And a lot of business people are just running with the information they had. Oh, this contract is good, then they go and do it. This business is good, they jump on board because they don't have the basis right. So they are not patient. You're only patient in something when you have the right education. Because then you get to understand the processes. You get to understand that it takes a while for you to build a skill, to build a network, to build the expertise, because you have the foundation right. So if you don't have the foundation right, you believe any lie, you believe anything that anybody tells you, and you still hope that you become successful, and that is delusional. You don't become successful because you just heard it on the radio. You become successful because you got the foundation right, which is education. And then when you hear the information, you'll be able to extract the right knowledge. And that with that knowledge, that becomes a force that pushes you on a pattern that you can succeed. So 3 kinds of education. I've talked about 8 kinds of education. So I'll go over them and then I close. So I've talked about academic education. I've talked about professional education. I've talked about family education. I've talked about spiritual or faith education. I've talked about health or fitness education. I've talked about racial or history kind of education. I've talked about personal or purpose kind of education. And I've talked about financial or entrepreneurship kind of education. Each of them is independent of the other. And until you get the basis right, you will not be able to change much in that sector or that area of your life. And I said that education is intentional. It's a deliberate process to tool somebody, to condition some people, to condition somebody, so that they'll be able to extract from information knowledge. And that with that knowledge, they'll be able to do anything that they want to do with their life. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Kwabena. Thank you, Nkrumah. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Jay-Z. Thank you, everybody who spent your time to watch this. Thank you. See you next time. Thank you very much.